What if China just made every airplane, every high-speed train, and every car on Earth obsolete at the same time? A new Chinese flying vehicle completed a test flight carrying 6 passengers at 300 kilometers per hour, with 0 runway required. It takes off vertically from a parking lot, travels between cities in minutes, and lands on a rooftop. This is not a prototype from 2050. It already flew, and the country that built it is now mass-producing it. The world is not ready for what comes next. The vehicle is called the eVTOL, Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Aircraft, and China's version, built by a company called EHang, already holds a type certificate from the Civil Aviation Administration of China. That certificate was issued in October of 2023, making EHang the first company on the planet to receive government approval to commercially operate a passenger-carrying autonomous flying vehicle. Not a test permit, not a research license, full commercial approval. The EH-216S carries 2 passengers and flies fully autonomously. No pilot on board, no joystick, no controls inside the cabin at all. The passenger enters, selects a destination on a touchscreen, and the aircraft handles everything else. It climbs to a cruise altitude of 300 meters, reaches speeds of 130 kilometers per hour, and covers distances of up to 30 kilometers on a single charge. The entire flight is monitored from a ground control station where one operator can manage multiple aircraft simultaneously. There are 2 seats, large panoramic windows, and nothing else. No instrument panel, no yoke, no pedals. The cabin looks nothing like a helicopter cockpit. Passengers sit inside what feels closer to a glass pod than an aircraft. The rotors, 16 of them arranged in 8 pairs, spin above and around the fuselage, producing a sound described by test passengers as quieter than a subway train. In the city of Guangzhou, EHang already operates commercial demonstration flights from a dedicated vertiport near the Pearl River. Tickets cost the equivalent of about $140 per flight. Passengers book through an app, arrive at a small terminal the size of a bus shelter, board within minutes, and land at another vertiport across the city. The flight that takes 45 minutes by car takes 8 minutes in the EH-216S. What makes this genuinely different from every other flying taxi project announced in the West is the word already. Joby Aviation in the United States has been developing its aircraft since 2009 and has still not received commercial approval. Lilium in Germany burned through billions in investor funding and went bankrupt in 2023. Archer Aviation, Whisk, Volocopter, all still in testing phases, all still years away from carrying a paying passenger legally. EHang carried its first paying passengers in 2023. By early 2024, the company had logged over 40,000 test and commercial flights across its entire fleet. The aircraft has operated in rain, in wind, in the dense urban air corridors above Chinese megacities. It has not had a single passenger fatality. China did not just build a flying car. It built the regulatory framework, the ground infrastructure, the charging network, and the public acceptance campaign simultaneously. While Western companies were still arguing with aviation authorities about certification standards, China wrote new standards specifically designed for autonomous air vehicles and approved its own aircraft under those standards within 18 months. The EH-216S is already operating in 5 Chinese cities. A larger model, the EH-216S, designed for cargo and emergency medical transport, is in parallel deployment. EHang has signed agreements with operators in the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, and Brazil. The aircraft that the world assumed was still a decade away is already in the air, already carrying passengers, and already expanding to new markets on 3 continents. EHang is not the only Chinese company building flying vehicles, and it is not building the fastest one. While EHang focused on short urban hops, a company called Autoflight pushed in a completely different direction: range and speed. In February of 2023, Autoflight's Prosperity Y completed a flight of 250 kilometers on a single charge, setting a world record for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. That record broke the previous best by nearly 100 kilometers. Prosperity I carries 4 passengers, plus a pilot, reaches cruise speeds of 200 kilometers per hour, and was designed specifically for the route between Shenzhen and Zhuhai, 2 major Chinese cities separated by the Pearl River Delta, that currently requires either a 90-minute drive across a bridge or a 40-minute ferry ride. In the Prosperity Y, that journey takes 15 minutes. Autoflight did not stop there. The company announced its next aircraft, the Prosperity 2, targeting a range of 500 kilometers and speeds approaching 300 kilometers per hour. At that performance level, the aircraft stops being a city shuttle and starts competing directly with regional turboprop planes, except it takes off from a rooftop, produces near-zero emissions, and costs a fraction of the price to operate per kilometer. The speed question matters more than most people realize. Every previous electric aircraft announcement hit the same wall: battery energy density. Jet fuel contains roughly 43 times more energy per kilogram than the best lithium-ion battery available today. That gap is why early eVTOL designs were limited to 30 or 40-kilometer ranges, which made them useful only for very short urban hops. Autoflight solved part of this problem not by waiting for better batteries, but by redesigning the aircraft's aerodynamics to be radically more efficient during cruise flight. During takeoff and landing, multiple rotors point upward and provide vertical lift. The Prosperity uses a tilt-rotor hybrid configuration. Once airborne, the aircraft transitions to forward flight. The main wing generates lift conventionally, and most of the rotors stop spinning entirely. Only two forward-facing propellers drive the aircraft in cruise mode. This configuration reduces energy consumption during cruise by over 60% compared to a multicopter design like the E-Hang, which must keep all rotors spinning at all times to stay airborne. That 60% reduction in cruise energy consumption is what makes the 250-kilometer range possible with current battery technology. It is also what makes the speed increase possible without the drag of 16 constantly spinning rotors. The Prosperity slips through the air with the efficiency closer to a conventional aircraft than a drone. China's Aviation Authority began the type certification process for the Prosperity 1 in 2023. Autoflight opened a production facility in Shanghai capable of manufacturing several hundred aircraft per year. The company has already signed a letter of intent with Bristow Group, one of the world's largest helicopter operators, for the purchase of up to 150 aircraft for deployment in Europe and the Gulf region. The speed record set by Prosperity 1 in February of 2023 stood for less than 4 months. In June of 2023, another Chinese company called Joby, not the American Joby, but a separate Chinese firm, announced a test flight reaching 270 kilometers per hour sustained over a distance of 180 kilometers. The competition inside China's eVTOL industry is not between China and the rest of the world. It is between dozens of Chinese companies racing against each other, each pushing the performance envelope further every quarter. By the end of 2023, China had more certified or near-certified eVTOL designs than every other country on Earth combined. There is no cockpit. That is the first thing that surprises everyone who sees the interior of the E-Hang EH216S for the first time. There is no instrument panel, no throttle lever, no altimeter, no radio stack. The entire front wall of the cabin is a smooth composite surface with a single 10-inch touchscreen mounted in the center. That screen shows the passenger one thing: a map with a destination selector. The passenger taps a location, confirms the flight, and the aircraft does the rest. Every system on board is redundant. The EH216S has 2 independent flight computers, 2 separate battery packs, 2 communication links to the ground control station, and 16 individual motors, each one capable of failing completely without causing the aircraft to crash. Engineers at E-Hang ran a test where they cut power to 4 motors simultaneously during flight. The aircraft compensated automatically within 200 milliseconds and continued flying normally. The passenger inside felt a brief vibration and nothing else. The ground control station that monitors every flight looks more like a NASA mission control room than an air traffic control tower. Operators sit in front of multi-screen workstations showing real-time telemetry from every aircraft in the network: altitude, speed, battery level, rotor RPM, wind conditions, GPS position, accurate to 30 centimeters. One operator can monitor up to 40 aircraft simultaneously. If any parameter falls outside normal range, the system flags it automatically, and the aircraft can be commanded to land at the nearest vertiport within seconds. Xpeng Aero HT, another Chinese company, took the interior concept in a completely different direction. Their X3 flying car, announced at the Guangzhou Auto Show in November of 2023, is a vehicle that drives on roads like a normal car and then unfolds a set of rotors from its roof and flies. The interior has a conventional steering wheel for road driving and a flight mode activated by a single button on the dashboard. When the button is pressed, the rotors deploy, the vehicle lifts off, and the steering wheel becomes inactive. A separate flight control system takes over entirely. The X3 is not a concept. XPeng delivered the first production units to customers in 2024. The base price is approximately $140,000, expensive by consumer car standards, but cheaper than a helicopter by a factor of 5. The vehicle fits in a standard parking space, charges from a regular electric vehicle charging station, and requires no special landing pad, just a flat surface of at least 10 meters by 10 meters. Inside the X3 during flight, the experience is unlike anything in conventional aviation. The cabin is pressurized and climate-controlled. The noise level at cruise is lower than a car on a highway, and the panoramic roof panels allow passengers to see directly above them as the vehicle climbs. XPeng tested the aircraft extensively in the skies above Guangzhou before the public launch, logging over 1,500 flight hours across the prototype fleet. What XPeng solved that no Western company has yet managed is the regulatory dual classification problem. A vehicle that both drives and flies must be certified by two separate government agencies, the Transport Authority for Road Use and the Aviation Authority for Flight. In the United States and Europe, getting both approvals simultaneously has proven practically impossible because the two regulatory frameworks were never designed to overlap. In China, the government created a joint certification pathway specifically for flying cars in 2022, and XPeng received its approvals within 18 months of applying. The interior of these aircraft is not just a design choice. It is a statement about who is in control. In every Chinese eVTOL currently approved for passenger flight, the answer is the same. The aircraft is in control, not the human sitting inside it. The passenger is a cargo that has chosen a destination. Everything else, navigation, collision avoidance, weather response, emergency landing selection, is handled by software running on processors that react 1,000 times faster than any human pilot. The absence of a cockpit is intentional. It is the design saying clearly that human intervention is not needed and not wanted. In May of 2023, a massive earthquake struck a remote mountainous region of Sichuan province in southwestern China. So, while we're all dreaming of flying cars, why not hop into the future with the best tools available? Check out playprofi.com, where all the hottest neural networks are waiting for you under one subscription. And don't forget, there's a sweet bonus of 500 tokens if you register today. Just click the link in the description. Roads into the affected villages were blocked by landslides within the first hour. Emergency teams could not reach survivors by vehicle. EHang deployed 4 EH-216S aircraft from a staging area 12 kilometers away. Each aircraft made repeated flights carrying medical supplies, food packages, and communication equipment directly into village clearings that had no road access and no helicopter landing pad. The aircraft landed on footpaths, on flat rooftops, on any surface level enough to support the landing gear. No pilot was needed on site. The ground operator coordinated all 4 aircraft remotely from a laptop connected to a mobile data network. That operation demonstrated something that no road-based transport system can replicate. The geography of China includes hundreds of millions of people living in areas where road infrastructure is expensive, slow to build, and frequently destroyed by natural disasters. Yunnan province alone has over 40,000 villages classified as difficult access communities. Building a paved road to each one would take decades and cost hundreds of billions of dollars. An eVTOL network connecting those same villages requires only a flat concrete pad the size of 2 parking spaces and a charging unit the size of a refrigerator. China's Ministry of Transport published a national low-altitude economy development plan in January of 2024. The plan allocates the equivalent of $15 billion toward building vertiport infrastructure across rural and semi-rural regions by 2030. The plan specifically targets provinces where road construction costs exceed $5 million per kilometer due to terrain. In those regions, eVTOL infrastructure costs less than 1% of the equivalent road construction budget, while providing faster point-to-point travel times. The medical implications are immediate and measurable. In remote areas of Guizhou and Gansu provinces, patients suffering cardiac events currently wait an average of 90 minutes for ambulance arrival due to road distances and mountain terrain. An eVTOL medical transport, operating from a county hospital, can reach any point within a 50-kilometer radius in under 15 minutes. EHang's cargo variant, the EH-216S medical version, carries a stretcher, a defibrillator, and enough oxygen supply for a 40-minute flight. The Civil Aviation Administration of China approved this variant for emergency medical transport in 2023. The agricultural sector identified a separate application almost immediately. China's mountainous farming regions use terraced fields that are physically impossible to reach with conventional agricultural machinery. Pesticide application, seed distribution, and crop monitoring in these areas has been done by hand for thousands of years because no vehicle could navigate the terrain. Drone technology began changing this around 2018, but payload limitations meant each drone could only carry small loads. The new generation of heavy-lift eVTOL cargo drones developed by companies including DJI and ZAG can carry loads of up to 500 kilograms, fly autonomously between charging stations, and cover agricultural areas of several hundred hectares per day without any human operator present in the field. In Hunan province, a cooperative of rice farmers began using autonomous cargo eVTOL aircraft for full-cycle field management in 2023. Planting, fertilizing, pesticide application, and partial harvesting assistance, all conducted by aircraft. The cooperative reported a 31% reduction in labor costs and a 12% increase in yield in the first full season of operation. The infrastructure shift extends to offshore energy. China operates the world's largest offshore wind farm construction program, with installations spread across hundreds of kilometers of ocean. Technician transport to offshore platforms currently relies on crew transfer vessels that take 2 to 4 hours each way in calm weather and cannot operate at all in rough seas. EHang and a consortium of Chinese energy companies began testing offshore eVTOL transport routes in the Bohai Sea in 2023. The aircraft covers the same distance in 22 minutes regardless of sea state, because it flies above the waves rather than through them. The pattern across every one of these applications is identical. A geography that previously required expensive, slow, or dangerous infrastructure to connect now requires only a charging pad and a network connection. China has more of that disconnected geography than almost any other country on Earth. It also now has the aircraft to connect it. The battery pack inside the EHang EH216S weighs 87 kilograms and delivers enough energy to power 16 motors simultaneously for 30 minutes of flight. That 30-minute limit is not a design flaw. It is a deliberate safety margin. The actual battery capacity supports 45 minutes of flight, but the aircraft's software locks the final 15 minutes as an emergency reserve that cannot be depleted during normal operation. Every flight is planned to land with that reserve intact. The cells inside that battery pack are lithium iron phosphate chemistry, not the lithium nickel manganese cobalt chemistry used in most electric cars. Lithium iron phosphate is heavier and has lower energy density, but it does not catch fire when damaged. In an aircraft flying over a city at 300 meters altitude, the decision to sacrifice energy density in exchange for thermal stability is not optional. It is the only acceptable engineering choice. A battery fire in a car stops the car. A battery fire in an aircraft at altitude kills everyone on board and potentially people on the ground below. The motors themselves are brushless permanent magnet motors developed by a Chinese supplier called Shenzhen Hobbywing. Each motor produces a maximum of 15 kilowatts, weighs 1.4 kilograms, and has no moving parts that require lubrication or scheduled replacement. The expected service life before overhaul is 3,000 flight hours. A conventional helicopter turbine engine requires major overhaul every 1,200 hours and costs upward of $200,000 per overhaul cycle. The 16 motors in the EHang collectively cost less than $12,000 to replace entirely. The flight computer architecture is where the engineering becomes genuinely remarkable. The EH216S runs 3 independent flight control computers simultaneously. All 3 process sensor data and calculate control outputs at the same time. If all 3 agree, the consensus output is sent to the motors. If one disagrees with the other 2, it is automatically isolated, and the 2 remaining computers continue controlling the aircraft. If 2 disagree, the aircraft immediately initiates an emergency landing at the nearest approved surface. This triple redundant voting architecture was borrowed directly from spacecraft design. It is the same basic approach used in the flight computers of the space shuttle. Sensor fusion is handled by a separate processor that combines data from 6 accelerometers, 6 gyroscopes, 2 GPS receivers, 2 barometric altimeters, a radar altimeter for low-altitude precision, and a set of ultrasonic sensors for ground proximity detection during landing. The system updates its position and attitude estimate 1,000 times per second. A human pilot's reaction time is measured in hundreds of milliseconds. The aircraft's reaction time is measured in single milliseconds. Collision avoidance uses a combination of ADS-B receivers, the same technology that commercial airliners use to broadcast their position, and a forward-facing millimeter-wave radar that detects obstacles down to objects the size of a wire cable at distances up to 300 meters. The system can identify a power line crossing its flight path at 200 meters altitude and reroute automatically without any ground operator input. The charging system is equally engineered for scale. A full recharge from the emergency reserve level to 100% takes 45 minutes using a standard DC fast charger delivering 150 kilowatts. Battery swap system, currently being deployed at high-traffic vertiports in Guangzhou and Shenzhen, replaces the entire battery pack in under 4 minutes using a robotic ground vehicle. With battery swap infrastructure, the aircraft's turnaround time between flights drops to under 6 minutes, including passenger boarding. The materials used in the fuselage are aerospace-grade carbon fiber composite panels manufactured by a subsidiary of the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, the same state enterprise that builds the C-919 commercial airliner. The entire airframe weighs 240 kilograms empty. The maximum takeoff weight is 600 kilograms, meaning the aircraft carries more than its own weight in passengers and battery combined. What makes all of this technology significant is not that any single component is unprecedented. Redundant flight computers exist in commercial aviation. Lithium iron phosphate batteries exist in electric buses. Carbon fiber airframes exist in every modern aircraft. What China assembled is a complete system where every component was selected and integrated specifically for autonomous urban air transport at commercial scale, and then certified, manufactured, and deployed faster than any comparable program in aviation history. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency received EHang's type certificate application in 2023 and immediately faced a problem it had never encountered before. Its existing certification framework for aircraft assumed a pilot was present on board. Every regulation, every safety standard, every checklist in European aviation law was written around the assumption that a human being with a license was sitting in the front of the aircraft making decisions. EHang's aircraft had no front. It had no pilot seat. The entire regulatory structure did not apply. ESA spent 14 months rewriting its certification basis specifically to accommodate fully autonomous passenger aircraft before it could even begin evaluating the EHang application. The United States Federal Aviation Administration faced the identical problem and responded by announcing a new regulatory framework for autonomous air vehicles in February of 2024, a framework that aviation lawyers estimated would take a minimum of 3 additional years to fully implement before any autonomous passenger aircraft could receive commercial approval in American airspace. While regulators in Washington and Brussels were rewriting rulebooks, Dubai signed an agreement with EHang in 2023 to begin commercial passenger operations by the end of 2024. The UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority created a dedicated fast-track certification pathway for autonomous air vehicles in 2022, anticipating exactly this situation. Dubai's Roads and Transport Authority designated 12 vertiport locations across the city, including sites at the Dubai Mall, Palm Jumeirah, and Dubai International Airport. The Emirate is not waiting for consensus from Western aviation bodies. It is building the infrastructure now. Saudi Arabia's NEOM project, the $500 billion planned city being constructed in the northwestern desert, included autonomous air taxi networks in its original master plan, published in 2022. NEOM signed a memorandum of understanding with EHang, covering the supply of aircraft and ground infrastructure for the city's internal transport system. A city being built from scratch in the desert has no legacy road infrastructure to protect and no existing aviation regulatory bureaucracy to navigate. It can design its transport system around eVTOL from the ground up. South Korea moved faster than any non-Chinese nation. The Korean Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport published a roadmap in 2023 targeting commercial urban air mobility operations in Seoul by 2025. Korea's Aviation Authority created a bilateral technical cooperation agreement with China's Civil Aviation Administration to share certification data and safety findings from EHang's operational fleet. Rather than repeating China's entire testing program independently, Korea is building on it. This approach cut Korea's estimated certification timeline by an estimated 2 years. Japan's response was split between admiration and alarm. Toyota, which has invested heavily in its own flying car subsidiary called SkyDrive, publicly acknowledged in a 2023 earnings call that Chinese eVTOL development had advanced further and faster than the company's internal projections had anticipated. SkyDrive's SD-03 aircraft, which targets commercial operation in 2028, now faces the prospect of entering a market where Chinese aircraft have been operating commercially for 5 years before it arrives. India represents the largest single potential market outside China. With 1.4 billion people, chronic road congestion in every major city, and vast rural regions with inadequate road infrastructure, India's geography is almost perfectly matched to eVTOL applications. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation began consultations with EHang in 2023. Tata Group, India's largest industrial conglomerate, announced a strategic assessment of eVTOL manufacturing partnerships with Chinese suppliers in the same year. The Indian government's position is complicated by ongoing political tensions with China, but the economic logic of the technology is difficult to ignore at any level of the government. The reaction that received the least public attention but carried the most long-term significance came from Boeing and Airbus. Both companies published internal strategy documents in 2023, later reported in aviation industry press, concluding that the eVTOL market would cannibalize a significant portion of the regional aviation market within 15 years. Routes under 500 kilometers currently served by turboprop and regional jet aircraft are the most vulnerable. An eVTOL network operating at scale on those routes offers lower ticket prices, door-to-door service without airport transit time, and zero direct emissions. Neither Boeing nor Airbus has a certified eVTOL product. Both are now funding accelerated development programs. Neither is projected to reach commercial certification before 2028 at the earliest. China did not ask the world for permission. It certified, built, deployed, and expanded. The world is now deciding how to respond to something that is already flying. A commuter in Shenzhen named Wei Jianming described his first flight on the EHang network in an interview published by the South China Morning Post in March of 2024. He booked the flight at 7:43 in the morning through an app on his phone, walked 4 minutes from his apartment to the vertiport on the roof of a commercial building 2 blocks away, boarded at 7:51, and landed at a vertiport adjacent to his office building at 7:59. The same journey by subway takes 41 minutes. By car during morning rush hour, it takes between 55 minutes and 1 hour and 20 minutes, depending on traffic. Wei paid the equivalent of $18 for the 8-minute flight. That price point is the number that changes everything. $18 for a cross-city flight that saves 40 minutes each way is not a luxury purchase for high-income commuters. It is a rational economic decision for a middle-income professional calculating the value of 80 minutes of recovered time per day against a daily transport cost comparable to 2 cups of coffee at a hotel. At that price, the question is not whether people will use it. The question is whether the infrastructure can scale fast enough to meet demand. EHang's current vertiport network in Shenzhen handles approximately 240 passenger flights per day across 12 locations. The company's published expansion plan targets 1,200 daily flights across 40 vertiport locations in Shenzhen alone by 2026. Achieving that target requires not just more aircraft, but a fundamentally different approach to urban airspace management, coordinating hundreds of autonomous aircraft flying simultaneously over a single city. China's solution to urban airspace management is a system called the Digital Low-Altitude Airspace Management Platform, developed jointly by the Civil Aviation Administration of China and a technology subsidiary of state-owned aerospace company AVIC. The platform divides low-altitude airspace below 300 meters into a 3-dimensional grid of corridor segments, each assigned to specific aircraft for specific time windows. Aircraft file flight plans automatically through the platform before each flight, receive corridor assignments in real time, and adjust routes dynamically if another aircraft's schedule changes. The system currently manages airspace over Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hangzhou simultaneously, coordinating over 800 drone and eVTOL flights per day across the 3 cities. The economic model that emerges from scaling this infrastructure is structurally different from anything in current transportation. A subway system requires decades of tunneling, hundreds of billions in construction costs, and fixed routes that cannot be changed once built. An eVTOL network requires charging pads, software, and aircraft. The routes exist wherever 2 charging pads exist. A new destination is added to the network the moment a vertiport is installed there. The marginal cost of expanding the network is the cost of a charging pad and a software update. Morgan Stanley published a market analysis in 2023 projecting the global urban air mobility market would reach $1 trillion in annual revenue by 2040. That projection was based on conservative adoption assumptions. It assumed eVTOL ticket prices would remain above $50 per flight and that network coverage would expand slowly due to regulatory barriers. Both assumptions are already being challenged by what is happening in China, where prices are below $20, and network expansion is measured in months rather than decades. The effect on urban real estate is already being discussed by property developers in Guangzhou. An apartment building with a rooftop vertiport is now a meaningfully different product than one without. The commute time from a suburban location with vertiport access to a city center can be shorter than the commute from a central urban location without it. Distance from the city center stops being the primary determinant of property value the moment travel time decouples from road distance. Several Guangzhou developers filed planning applications in 2023 that included rooftop vertiport infrastructure as a standard building feature rather than an optional addition. The commute is the most visible application, but it is not the most transformative one. The average person commutes twice a day. The same eVTOL infrastructure that carries commuters in the morning carries medical supplies to clinics at noon, delivers high-value cargo to manufacturing facilities in the afternoon, and transports emergency response teams at any hour. The aircraft does not care what it is carrying. The network does not distinguish between a passenger and a package. Every hour, the aircraft is not carrying a commuter. It is available for something else. The utilization economics of a vehicle that operates 20 hours a day across multiple use cases are fundamentally different from a car that sits parked for 22 hours out of every 24. EHang received orders for over 2,000 aircraft in 2023. It delivered 152. The gap between demand and production capacity is the single most important number in the entire eVTOL story right now because it reveals exactly how fast this technology is about to move and exactly who will be left behind when it does. The waiting list for an EHang EH216S currently extends to 2027 for new commercial operators. Governments and emergency services get priority allocation. Medical transport operators in China get the next tier. Urban air taxi networks in approved Chinese cities follow. Private buyers and international customers sit at the bottom of the allocation hierarchy. A hospital in rural Guizhou that needs medical transport aircraft gets its order filled before a luxury resort in the Maldives that wants to offer scenic flights to guests. That prioritization is not a market decision. It is a government directive embedded in EHang's production allocation framework. The production constraint is not motors or software or airframes. It is battery cells. The lithium iron phosphate cells used in the EH216S come from a single supplier, CATL, the Chinese battery manufacturer that also supplies cells to Tesla, BMW, and Volkswagen for their electric cars. CATL's total production capacity is allocated across multiple industries simultaneously, and automotive contracts signed years ago take precedence over new aviation orders. EHang is currently negotiating a dedicated aviation cell supply agreement with CATL that would guarantee a fixed monthly cell allocation independent of automotive demand fluctuations. Until that agreement is signed and production lines are dedicated, every spike in electric car demand directly reduces the number of eVTOL aircraft that can be built. Xpeng AeroHT faces a different constraint. The X3 flying car requires a type certificate for both road and air operation, and the road certification requires crash testing under standards that were written for conventional automobiles. A vehicle designed to be as light as possible for flight performs very differently in a frontal crash test than a vehicle designed with a conventional steel safety cage. Xpeng's engineering team spent 11 months redesigning the lower chassis specifically to pass road crash standards without adding enough weight to compromise flight performance. The solution involved a carbon fiber crash structure that absorbs impact energy differently from steel, but achieves equivalent occupant protection scores. The redesign added 22 kilograms to the vehicle's empty weight, and pushed the delivery timeline back by 7 months. The price question is more complicated than the list price suggests. The EHang EH216S has a published purchase price of approximately $400,000 per aircraft for commercial operators. That number sounds large until it is compared to a conventional helicopter, which costs between $1 million and $3 million to purchase and requires a licensed pilot earning a 6-figure salary to operate. The eVTOL requires no pilot. Its maintenance cost per flight hour is estimated at $38, compared to over $300 per flight hour for a light helicopter. An operator who buys 3 EHang aircraft and runs them 16 hours a day recovers the purchase cost in under 2 years through ticket revenue at current pricing. For individual private ownership, the calculation is different. The Xpeng X3 at $140,000 is priced above a luxury car but below a light aircraft. It requires a driving license for road use and a newly created Light Autonomous Aircraft Operator Certificate for flight, a qualification that requires 12 hours of ground school and no actual flight training because the aircraft flies itself. The operator certificate exam is conducted online and takes approximately 4 hours to complete. China issued over 3,000 of these certificates in the first 6 months after the qualification was introduced. The question of who gets one is also a question of who gets excluded. Rural communities in countries outside China that lack the regulatory framework, the charging infrastructure, or the income levels to support ticket prices above $10 per flight will not see this technology for a decade or more after it becomes routine in Chinese and Gulf cities. The same geography that makes eVTOL most valuable, remote, road-poor, medically underserved regions is also the geography least likely to have the electrical grid capacity to support charging infrastructure. A vertiport in a village with 4 hours of grid power per day cannot support the recharge cycles needed to run a viable air transport operation. China solved this problem for its own territory by combining eVTOL deployment with rural electrification investment. The $15 billion low-altitude economy infrastructure plan announced in January of 2024 includes grid upgrade funding specifically for vertiport locations in areas with insufficient existing power supply. Other countries have no equivalent program. The technology exists, the aircraft exists. The infrastructure gap is what determines who flies and who watches from the ground. The question at the start was simple. Did China just make every airplane, every train, and every car obsolete at the same time? The answer is no, and yes, depending on which part of the transport system you are looking at and on what timeline. Long-haul aviation is not threatened. A Boeing 787 flying 400 passengers from London to Singapore at 900 kilometers per hour over 14,000 kilometers is not replaceable by any electric aircraft operating on current or projected battery technology within the next 30 years. The physics of energy density make that replacement impossible on any near-term horizon. What is already obsolete, right now, not in the future, is the short-distance urban and regional transport model that forces people into cars, buses, and trains to cover distances under 300 kilometers between points that are not adjacent to airports or rail stations. That model is being dismantled in China today, and the dismantling is accelerating. In 2023, Chinese eVTOL companies collectively raised the equivalent of $3.2 billion in investment funding. In the first quarter of 2024 alone, EHang's stock price increased by 61% following the announcement of new commercial contracts in Southeast Asia. The Civil Aviation Administration of China issued type certificates or advanced certification approvals for 7 separate eVTOL designs in 2023. More certifications in 1 year than the rest of the world's aviation authorities combined had issued across the previous decade for all categories of new aircraft. The Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk in 1903. Commercial passenger aviation did not become routine until the 1950s, nearly 50 years later. The gap between the first demonstration and mass adoption was measured in generations. The gap between EHang's first commercial passenger flight in 2023 and mass adoption in China is being measured in years, not decades, because the regulatory framework, the manufacturing base, the charging infrastructure, and the public acceptance were all built simultaneously rather than sequentially. By 2030, The Chinese government's published target is 10,000 vertiports operating across the country, supporting a fleet of over 50,000 certified eVTOL aircraft across passenger, cargo, and emergency service applications. If that target is met at even 50%, China will operate more civilian aircraft than the entire current global commercial aviation fleet combined. The single fact that is hardest to process is this one. The EHang EH-216S, the aircraft that started this entire transformation, has no controls inside the cabin. No yoke, no throttle, no altimeter. Nothing a pilot would recognize as an aircraft cockpit, and it has already carried passengers safely across tens of thousands of flights over Chinese cities. The most significant shift in personal transport since the automobile is not being driven by the passenger. It is not being flown by a pilot. It is being managed by software, monitored by a person sitting at a desk with a laptop, and experienced by ordinary commuters who book it the same way they order food delivery. Travel is not the same. It changed already. Most of the world just has not boarded yet.